Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Kos from MadeToCreate.me, and today we are going to be taking a look at some of the effects that were used in the song One Dance by Drake. Now I'm going to take you through how the song was made, or how I think it was made, step by step to the best of my knowledge, from start to finish. That means the instrumental and vocals. But before we continue, this video is sponsored by
ImageLine.
So if you want to get out of your grandma's basement and stop using cracks, purchase FL Studio exclusively today. Go to the ImageLine website and paste the code that you see popping up on screen right now. Or alternatively, you can just click the link down below to save 10% on your purchase. Thank you for listening to this public service announcement and enjoy your tutorial. And if you want to see the finished version of the pilot theme that we are about to produce, click here. Or alternatively, look in the description box for the video. I would highly recommend checking out the finished version before you waste the time with this tutorial. I don't really have time for haters. So just like in my last tutorial, this is about how close I got to the original sound. If you don't like it, you can go fool, cause I really don't care. Disclaimer, my name is not Drake, so I'm not gonna sound exactly like him, and neither will you. So let's get right into it. But because my computer decided to be a little we had to break this tutorial up in two parts. With the first part, I'm going to show you how to do the instrumental, and with the second part, I'm going to show you what I did to the vocals. So let's start off by taking a look at the instrumental. Basically what I did is I imported a version of the original song into FL Studio and recreated it step by step to the best of my knowledge, and I'm going to show you what I did here. And as a thank you for watching, I'm going to include a downloadable version of the FLP file for you guys so you can open it up at home, and that way you have all the samples that I used. So the first thing I did was create the kick, which is just a straight 4/4 beat. And that's just a kick sample that I'll include in the FLP for you guys. The second thing I did is create that little percussion sound here. The third thing I did was create that little bleepy sound that if you listen really closely, you can hear it in the background of the song. And the way I created that was just with Fruity's built-in 3x Os. Basically kept everything on the standard settings. So if we reset it here to default, basically I'm just resetting both of these knobs here and keeping it on the standard setting like that. And if we go over here into the piano roll, it's basically just an F that's playing repeatedly and A sharp. The next thing I did was create the piano sound here. And that one was a little bit trickier because in my opinion it's really hard to get a good sounding piano in FL Studio. So I actually layered two different piano sounds over top of each other, EQ'd them all separately, and sort of tried making them sound a little bit better that way. So the first plugin I use is just Citrus with the piano preset Realistic 3. And because it has a long reverb, just turn down this effects knob right here. Maybe not that much. And for the second instance of Citrus that's layered over top of the first one, I basically just use a piano preset called Grand Piano. Turn down a bunch of these operators because we don't need them. Adjusted the sustain and the release to make them a little bit shorter because the Grand Piano original sound is very roomy and reverby, and we don't really want that because that's not what the original sound in the song sounds like. So after we lower the sustain and the release, it's going to sound like this. And the rest of the sound we're just going to bring out with effects. So open your mixer, go to the Grand Piano, and open Fruity Limiter as your first effect on the Grand Piano. And first what we're going to be focusing on is the noise gate section here. Hit play again and adjust the threshold to where just the tips of the waveforms are passing by. Basically what that's doing is that anytime the signal passes the threshold, the noise gate is going to act on it. So the gain is basically telling the noise gate how to act on it. So by turning it down, we're basically saying every time the waveform or the audio signal passes a threshold, I want you to slam the gain down. And the release basically says how fast you want the noise to be lowered. So what you want is just the first transients to pass through the noise gate, and then everything after that we're going to be pulling down the volume just to suck that original reverb out of the grand piano, but still keeping the characteristics of that sound. So basically, as you can see, everything that's highlighted in purple is reverb on the grand piano. So then you want to make sure that your release is adjusted properly so it doesn't sound too artificial, and it just kind of gives that original piano sound a good support. So the higher your release is, the more of that initial reverb you're gonna get in your sound. And once you finish that, what you can also do is adjust your compressor on this side, adjust the threshold over here, and the ratio to basically compress the piano a little bit. Adjust your makeup gain. And if you need, adjust your threshold again. And that's it for the limiter. Second thing I did was adjust it a little bit with the parametric EQ. So I took out some of the high end and boosted a little bit of the lower mids, because before it sounded a little bit too sharp. Third thing I did was throw on fruity delay. Just turned up the offset a little bit. The time I set to 2 steps down here, and the volume I turned to about 1/4. And the last thing I did was add a little bit of reverb to glue everything together. And if the reverb's a little bit too loud, we can just turn down the wet knob over here. And that sounds pretty good to me. But before I move on, I just want to look at some of the effects that I used on the realistic synth preset for Citrus on the first piano. Basically on this piano, I just threw on an EQ and shaped it a little bit to get it as close to its original sound as I could. I threw on a stereo enhancer, just right click and click on 4 strings. That'll give it a nice stereo width to it. The fruity limiter, which is basically just used as a compressor here. We adjusted the threshold and the ratio, nothing more, to compress it a little bit and make it sound a little bit more powerful. And again, we threw on a reverb, turned down the earlier flexions a lot, and we turned down the wet a little bit to mix it in with the other piano. And another quick tip for when you're editing piano in FL Studio is that you never want to just have a flatline velocity on all your keys, because that'll make it sound a little weak. So it's a little bit easier to detect that it's not a real piano. So you want to make sure that your velocities are a little bit different from one another. So the next sound I focused on was this sound here, which is the bass. And that little high-pitched synthy sound. All that I did was use a copy of the 3x oscillator and turn down the second and third operator by an octave. Basically what it's doing is when I'm playing a note here, it automatically copies the note to down here without me having actually physically put it in. And then if we look at the bass sound in the mixer, we can see that I basically just threw a compressor on it with the blower preset, which makes it sound a little less bitchy. And then a parametric EQ again to shape it just a little bit. Usually down here in the 60 Hertz range is where you have that really nice bassy sound. So if you're looking for a little bit of boost in the bass, always look around your 60s. It'll be the easiest thing to do. And the next sound that I paired with the bass is really interesting, because if you listen to the original song really closely, I can almost feel that 100% it is this exact sound. And I've heard it 100 times before. Basically what it is just a preset in Citrus titled Numb. So you can find that preset right here. And I was so extremely weirded out by how close that preset is to the original sound that was used in the song. Now, I'm not gonna go around spewing my mouth off that Drake uses presets, but damn, this one's close. So yeah, listen to the original sound, and I bet you somewhere in there you're gonna hear that exact sound. And all I did with that was route it through to the mixer, turn it down a little bit, and adjusted the levels. Now, the next two sounds that were in the song were a little bit hard to duplicate because I think they actually used a real guitar in there. Now, this is the closest that I could get. It sounds really synthy, but mixed in with the vocals, it sounds okay. So yeah, it sounds kind of bitchy, not gonna lie, but if you're on a budget and you can't afford to hire a guitar player and you have literally zero skills, this is the closest you're gonna get. And with the vocals in there, it just hides it a little bit, so it's not that bad. So basically what I'd used here is just another Citrus preset called Deep, which is under the bass section right here. I routed it through to my mixer again and adjusted the frequencies a little bit with the parametric EQ. I used the high pass filter on this one. So in order to do that, just click on one of the numbers here, select type, select high pass, and select order, and then gentle 8. That'll give you a nice wide curve around. The reason I did that is to try to get closer to the original sound and just take out some of the lower frequencies because we don't want them competing with our oscillator that we use for the bass. It's pretty important that when you're mixing that you sort of keep in mind where all your different instruments are and what it's going to sound like, because if you have too many bassy frequencies layering over top of each other, your mix is just going to end up sounding muddy and not professional at all. So after that, there was another guitar part that I think I actually did a really great job of replicating for not having a guitar and being on a budget. So let's check it out here. Whoo! Sounds pretty cool, right? Basically what that is just GMS on another preset called Basses and Aggressive TE. And once you have the sound you like, just go over into your piano roll because we want to have that slidey effect. And that's pretty simple to do. So in order to do that, just create your bass note over here, add a second note underneath or up top of it, and select this little button right here, which basically tells FL Studio that you want to slide from that note down to that note. We can also change it up here and get it to slide up. So then we use the same concept over here in that last outro part. We basically just put a bunch of notes down. So we use the slide notes multiple times. And then if you go over to your mixer, all I did to make it sound a little bit more gritty was add a fruity wave shaper and set it to the preset fast distortion. Basically just gives it a little bit of a distortion sound. Then I added another reverb and just turned down the wet a little bit. This one's the same preset that we used earlier, which is, I think it's called Large Hall or something like that. Just make sure that the wet isn't up too high because you don't want the reverb muddying up your mix. Then we added a delay, same kind of deal as the one that we did before. Just turn the offset to the right a little bit, turn the time to set 2 steps, and turn down the volume a little bit. And that's the sound that we're left with here. And as far as those special effects goes, that was pretty much it. We added a little bit of a shaker here. I think in the original song they used white noise, but I just came back from a really cool studio session with one of my good friends, and we recorded a rain shaker in stereo. So I could not let this session go without using that rain shaker. It sounds really cool. So if you put your headphones on while listening to that sound, you're literally going to feel like as if that shaker is next to you. And the best thing about this is by downloading the FLP below, you get that shaker sound for free. But I am going to run through the mixer really quickly just to give you an overview of what I did within the mix. So with the kick, I basically just added a parametric EQ, and again, see here a boost at around 52 Hertz to give it a little bit more bottom end, and a boost around 500 to give it a little bit more snap.
Now, I don't know why it's not routed anymore, but I basically took the kick and I routed it through to the 3x oscillator over here, turned it down, or you can just right click and click on sidechain. That will send a ghost print to the bass track. And on the bass track itself, I had a limiter, which is sidechained to the kick so that the two low frequencies don't conflict with each other. So on the limiter, just make sure that you're turning down the threshold a little bit, turn up the ratio, and select your sidechain number 1. And basically what it's doing is then affecting the bassy part with the kick drum. So as you can see, every time the kick drum is playing, the bass gets pulled down just a little bit, which is great because then those two don't conflict in the mix. So moving over to the perk, I left it pretty much the way it is because it sounded pretty cool. The shaker, I didn't have to do anything to it, which is great. And then the rest of the plugins over here are history. So now the last thing that I'm going to do to the instrumental is apply a plugin titled Ferric TDS, which is literally the best free plugin, aside from Spitfish, that I have ever got. Now, Ferric, basically what it is, it's a tape saturation plugin. I'll leave the download link in the description below so you guys can check it out for yourselves as well. But I believe that in the original version of the song, it was actually recorded to tape, because if you listen to it, right in the beginning, you can hear a small amount of tape hiss. Now, usually when you're recording to tape, that tape hiss only occurs when you're not hitting the tape machine hot enough. But I believe they added it just to add a little bit of saturation and make the sound a little bit smoother. So because we don't have a $100,000 tape machine, this is the closest that we're gonna get. So Ferric TDS, here it is. Just have a quick right click on it and hit on maximizer. Or I don't think that was the right one, max it. So here's with Ferric TDS. And then without it. And now once we're done with that, we want to get rid of the fruity limiter that's always on the master track, and I do not know why they do that. And then we can export the instrumental as a WAV file and move on to our vocals. So while this is exporting, I'm going to blend in a video link of the next tutorial that I have for you guys, which is the vocals, which is basically where most of the work happened in the whole song. So you should definitely check that one out. I think I got really close, which is really cool. So thank you for sticking with me so far, and I'll see you in the next part.